stories beyond imagination.
Don't. They are coming. Each someone may come. You have doomed your species.
The desert sun fell heavy upon the ruins, its heat pressing like an invisible hand against the cracked stones of the forgotten temple. For centuries, the locals had avoided this place, calling it cursed, whispering tales of a guardian that had once watched the stars with eyes of fire. To most, it was nothing but a superstition attached to ancient rubble, a myth passed down through frightened generations. Yet to a group of eager archaeologists and thrill-seeking students, the ruins were simply a stage for entertainment, a backdrop to selfies and exaggerated dares. Daniel, the youngest of the group, had been laughing with his friends when they stumbled upon the statue, a figure carved of black stone that loomed taller than any man, its head crowned with jagged ridges, its lips parted as though frozen mid-breath. An inscription beneath it read, "Kiss the guardian and it shall speak." The words were etched in an unfamiliar script, translated crudely by researchers years before. Daniel, bold and mischievous, smirked at the idea. "A kiss for an alien," he joked, wiping sand from his mouth. His friends egged him on, pulling out their phones to capture the prank. The desert air grew still as Daniel leaned forward, brushing his lips against the cold stone mouth. What began as laughter echoed into silence, a silence so absolute it seemed to drink the sound from the world. At first, nothing happened. Daniel straightened, chuckling nervously at his own theatrics. His friends booed jokingly, disappointed that the prank had yielded nothing more than a dusty kiss. One of them reached forward to push him aside, but then the statue trembled. It was not subtle. It shook like a creature awakening after centuries of sleep. A sound rose from deep within its chest, a groaning vibration that rattled the floor beneath their feet. The statue's eyelids, stone though they were, cracked open with a slow, grinding resistance. Behind them glowed two brilliant orbs of pale blue fire, burning with a consciousness so alien, so ancient, that every soul in the room felt its weight. The laughter died instantly, replaced with gasps and panicked steps backward. One of the students dropped their phone. It clattered against the ground and went silent. The statue's head turned, slowly, impossibly, until its glowing gaze locked onto Daniel. In that moment, the playful arrogance in his face melted into terror. The lips of the statue moved, but the voice that came forth was not sound. It was inside their minds, pressing into their thoughts like ice. "You have doomed your species." The words reverberated through Daniel's skull, hammering against his consciousness as if spoken directly into his soul. He stumbled back, clutching his head, gasping for breath. Around him, the others screamed, some running for the exit, others frozen in place, unable to comprehend what they had just heard. The temple itself seemed to respond. The walls began to glow with symbols that had lain invisible until that very moment. Crimson light flared from the carvings, outlining scenes that were once dismissed as decorative. Myth, towering ships, descending from the heavens, fire sweeping through cities, oceans boiling as monstrous shapes rose from beneath the waves. These were not myths, the scholars realized. They were warnings. "It's impossible," whispered Professor Reyes, one of the senior archaeologists, his voice trembling. "It's a chronicle, a prophecy." Dust rained from the cracked ceiling as the tremors grew stronger. Daniel tried to speak, to apologize, but no words would form. His lips moved soundlessly as the guardian's gaze pierced him. The alien fire within those eyes seemed to peel away his very identity, leaving only a boy who realized too late that a single, careless act could change the fate of worlds. The guardian's voice surged again, this time echoing aloud in a deep, resonant tone that shook the chamber. "For 1,000 years, I held the gate shut. Your touch has broken the seal. They are coming!" As the final word rang through the air, the temperature plummeted. Their breath misted in the sudden cold, and a deep hum filled the desert outside, reverberating for miles. Animals shrieked and scattered. Flocks of birds rose in frantic spirals, and the horizon shimmered as if reality itself were warping. The ground split with a sharp crack, thin fissures racing outward from the temple. glowing faintly as though magma boiled just beneath the surface. Some of the tourists bolted, their terrified cries echoing across the sands. But others, archaeologists, students, thrill-seekers, remained rooted, paralyzed by awe and dread. Daniel collapsed to his knees. His voice cracked as he begged, "Please, I didn't know. I thought it was just a legend." But the Guardian did not acknowledge his words. Its gaze was fixed beyond him, upward, through the crumbled ceiling and into the skies, as if watching for something vast approaching. Professor Reyes forced himself to step closer to the glowing walls. Ignoring the screams behind him, he traced trembling fingers over the illuminated carvings, reading the shifting script as it rearranged before his eyes. "It's a record of cycles," he muttered. "Each time a civilization awakens them. Each time the Guardian seals them away again, but at a cost." His words trailed off as he recognized the final panel, a figure kneeling before the Guardian, bound by chains of light, its body dissolving into dust. The Guardian's sacrifice. Reyes turned toward Daniel, his expression horrified. "You broke the last seal. There may not be another chance. This time, no one can close the gate." His warning was drowned by a new sound, an unearthly rumble from above. The sky itself groaned, clouds twisting into spirals of unnatural geometry. Shadows spread across the desert floor, as though something immense had shifted on the other side of the veil between worlds. The students sobbed. Someone whispered a prayer, and Daniel, trembling, realized the Guardian's prophecy was not for the distant future, it was for now. The desert sky darkened unnaturally fast, as though an eclipse had swallowed the sun without warning. A low vibration passed through the earth, rattling loose stones from the temple's shattered roof. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs as he tried to crawl backward, but the Guardian's glowing eyes tracked him like a predator watching prey. "They were never myths," muttered one of the students, her voice breaking. "All the stories, they were warnings." The glowing fissures on the ground expanded, spiderwebbing across the sand in fiery veins, each crack releasing a sound like a sigh escaping the lungs of the earth. The archaeologists clutched their notes, papers fluttering away in the storm of rising wind. Then came the sound, faint at first, like whispers carried on the breeze, but growing louder until it became an overwhelming chorus. It was language, yet not. A resonance that bypassed the ears and settled like knives directly into the brain. Daniel screamed, his hands clutching his skull as if to tear out the voices. The Guardian raised a massive stone hand and pressed it against the air, as though holding back an invisible tide. The effort made the statue quake. "The gate has thinned," the voice thundered. "Already they bleed through. You have no time." Panic erupted among the group. Several tourists sprinted across the desert sands, but the fissures caught them. One man's scream echoed as his leg plunged into a glowing crack, the skin blistering instantly before he was yanked down by an unseen force. His body vanished into the light, consumed in a flash of fire and shadow. Those left behind staggered back, horrified. Professor Reyes tried to rally them. "We must record this. The world needs to know," but his words were drowned as the sky tore open above them. A rift split across the heavens, jagged like shattered glass, revealing a glimpse of something vast on the other side. A colossal shadow moved, blotting out the stars. It wasn't a ship nor a creature as Earth knew it, but something in between, a structure alive, pulsating, its surface rippling with alien geometries that defied the mind's ability to focus. The Guardian raised both arms now, chanting in that same psychic resonance. Energy flared from its chest, casting protective light around the trembling survivors. "Run!" it roared. "You are fragile. You cannot withstand their gaze." Daniel stumbled to his feet, his throat raw from screaming. He grabbed the professor's sleeve, desperate. "Tell me how to fix this!" "There must be a way." Reyes's face was pale, streaked with sweat, his eyes wide as he stared at the carvings still glowing on the wall. "The seal required a sacrifice," he whispered. "Every cycle, someone gave themselves to power the lock. But now," his voice broke, "the Guardian has already sacrificed itself 1,000 years ago. It cannot do so again." Daniel's stomach turned cold. He looked back at the towering figure, its stone frame cracking as it poured energy into the widening rift above. With each pulse of light, Fractures split across its chest and shoulders, glowing like magma veins. The Guardian was dying. "No," Daniel rasped. "There has to be another way." Behind them, the sky creature pushed closer to the breach, its tendrils reaching downward like pillars of shadow. The air tasted of metal and ash, every breath painful. Daniel realized then that his careless kiss had not just awakened the Guardian, it had drained the last of its strength. The lock had been broken, and the Guardian had nothing left to give. The winds screamed across the desert as fragments of reality, peeled away like shards of broken glass. Through the widening rift, alien landscapes bled into view, oceans of black fire, skies filled with screaming constellations, cities floating like bone fragments across endless voids. And within that nightmare realm, more shadows stirred. Countless forms, each more grotesque and incomprehensible than the last, pressed against the breach like insects eager to pour into fresh soil. The students wailed, their minds unraveling at the sight. One girl clawed at her own eyes, shrieking that the stars were burning holes through her skull. Another dropped to his knees, mumbling nonsense prayers to gods who had never existed. Daniel gritted his teeth, refusing to collapse. "There must be something I can do," he shouted, his voice nearly torn away by the storm. The Guardian's head snapped down toward him, its gaze fierce. "Then give yourself," it thundered. "You opened the gate. Only your essence can seal it, flesh to bind, blood to close." The words tore through Daniel's mind like knives, leaving him trembling. He staggered back. "You mean, I have to die?" The Guardian did not respond with comfort, only truth. Its cracking frame shifted, stone fragments flaking away as radiant light bled from within. The professor staggered forward, shouting over the howling wind. "Daniel, it makes sense. The myths always spoke of a key-bearer. The fool whose touch awoke the Guardian. The same fool must end it. It was never random. It was always chosen." Daniel's mind reeled. He thought of his life back home, his parents, his sister, the music he loved, the dreams he carried of seeing the world. And now, the weight of billions of lives pressed onto his shoulders. His hands shook as he stared up at the breach, the horrors pushing closer with each second. Could he really give himself away? Around him, chaos reigned. Survivors screamed, the sands split apart, the sky shattered further. The Guardian's booming voice echoed again. "Choose quickly. Every breath you waste is another moment they consume." Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. He had always been reckless, always joked his way through consequences. But this was no longer a joke. This was the end. Lightning tore across the desert, though no clouds remained, just the twisting void above. Bolts of crimson energy struck the sands, vaporizing dunes in an instant. Daniel watched helplessly as two fleeing tourists were caught in the blast, reduced to ash before their screams could even finish. His stomach churned. Death was everywhere, clawing at the edges of Earth. He turned to Reyes. "If I do this, will it work? Will it really seal them out?" Reyes's eyes were wild, but filled with grim certainty. "The Guardian has no reason to lie. It has protected us for millennia. If it says only your essence can seal the gate, then your life is the price." Daniel's throat tightened. He wasn't a hero. He was just a student who kissed a statue as a joke. But as the breach widened and the alien shadows writhed with hunger, he realized it didn't matter who he was. What mattered was what he chose now. His hands clenched into fists. Fear still rattled him, but beneath it burned something else: resolve. Daniel turned to the Guardian, his voice hoarse but steady. "Tell me how." The alien's glowing eyes fixed on him. Cracks spidered across its chest, the stone nearly giving way as it extended a massive hand. In the palm, light swirled, golden, searing, alive. "Step forward," it commanded. "Place your heart into my grasp. Your blood will bind the seal. Your soul will weave the chains. You will not return." The words carried no malice, only certainty. Daniel's knees trembled as he approached. Each step felt like walking against a hurricane, the winds lashing, the screams of the void clawing at his sanity. He thought of running, of hiding, of waiting for someone else to act, but deep down he knew no one else could. He stopped before the Guardian's towering form. Its hand hovered, waiting. Daniel exhaled a shaky breath and whispered, "If this saves them, then take me." the Guardian's hand closed around him. Not crushing, but engulfing him in searing light. Pain exploded through Daniel's body, sharper than fire, deeper than bone. His scream echoed, blending with the howls of the rift above. Blood boiled in his veins. His skin burned with radiant symbols, glowing brighter with each heartbeat. The fissures in the desert flared, then began to close, as if pulled shut by invisible stitches. The rift in the sky fought back, widening in resistance, but the Guardian roared, pouring Daniel's essence into the lock. "Hold!" it thundered. The light within Daniel's chest grew unbearable, his vision dissolving into white. He saw flashes, memories, faces of loved ones, laughter from years past, all unraveling into threads of light that the Guardian wove into chains across the breach. The alien horrors shrieked as the chains tightened, their tendrils snapping against the barrier, unable to break through. Daniel gasped, his final breath torn away as his body disintegrated into pure energy. The rift convulsed violently, 1,000 screams echoing as if the stars themselves were wailing. The chains of light constricted, layer upon layer, until the breach snapped shut with a blinding flash. The desert was thrown into silence, the air heavy with the stench of ozone. Where Daniel had stood, nothing remained but a faint shimmer of dust that glittered, briefly before fading into the wind. The Guardian collapsed, its stone frame shattering into rubble as the last of its energy poured out. Its glowing eyes dimmed, flickered, and then went dark. Professor Reyes fell to his knees, his chest heaving as he stared at the ruins around him. The survivors huddled together, broken, trembling, and silent. They had witnessed the impossible. They had seen one of their own give himself to save the world. Yet the silence was not peace, it was mourning. For Daniel, for the Guardian, and for the knowledge that this had only been one cycle among many. Reyes rose unsteadily, his hands shaking as he gathered the scattered notes that had survived the storm. His eyes traced the last glowing remnants of the carvings on the wall, now fading into darkness. The final message burned into his mind. The lock holds only as long as the sacrifice endures. When memory fades, so too will the chains. A chill spread through him. Humanity had been spared for now. But in 1,000 years or less, another fool would awaken the Guardian. Another cycle would begin, and the same terrible choice would demand itself again. He looked to the sky, still scarred with faint cracks that shimmered ominously. The war was not over. It had merely been delayed. Reyes whispered Daniel's name, vowing never to let the world forget. The boy who had saved them, all with a single reckless kiss. But deep inside, he wondered, had sealing the gate truly stopped the horrors? Or had Daniel only trapped them long enough to grow hungrier? The desert wind offered no answer. The desert was quiet again, but it was not the same silence that had blanketed the ruins earlier. This silence felt heavy, weighted with secrets and sorrow, as if the very earth grieved for what had transpired. The survivors huddled at the edge of the temple, staring at the shattered remains of the Guardian. Its stone fragments lay scattered, glowing faintly with dying embers before going dark one by one. Professor Reyes forced himself to walk forward, kneeling to touch one of the larger pieces. It was warm, almost alive, pulsing weakly like a fading heartbeat. "It's gone," he whispered. "Truly gone." One of the students, her face streaked with tears, asked, "And Daniel? Where is he?" Reyes swallowed hard. "He is the chains now. His essence binds the gate." The weight of those words pressed into their chests. Daniel, the boy who had made a joke of an ancient warning, was no more. He had become legend in the span of minutes. Yet none of them could find comfort in that. The desert wind howled, carrying the faint echo of voices, whether of memory or of the horrors beyond the gate, no one could be sure. As dawn broke, the survivors began their trek back to civilization. The desert stretched endlessly, but each step carried them further from the temple, and closer to a world that would never believe them. Reyes walked at the front, his mind racing. How could he explain what had happened? Would governments listen, or would they bury the truth to keep panic from spreading? He remembered the inscription beneath the Guardian, the one that had started it all. "Kiss the Guardian, and it shall speak." He now understood that those words had been a warning disguised as a dare, a cruel irony left behind by those who had endured this cycle before. His heart ached with guilt. He should have stopped Daniel. He should have destroyed the statue long ago. Though such an act might have been impossible, now with the Guardian gone, humanity was unprotected. The lock might hold for centuries, but without its warden, who would stand watch? He feared the answer: no one. By the time they reached the nearest village, word had already begun to spread. The locals had seen the sky tear open, had heard the screams on the wind, had felt the earth shake beneath their feet. Fear was etched into every face. They demanded answers, but the survivors had none that could soothe them. Reyes tried to speak, to explain that the danger had been contained, but his words felt hollow. How could he assure them when cracks had lingered in the sky, shimmering faintly like scars that refused to heal? Some villagers fell to their knees in prayer, while others shouted angrily, accusing the outsiders of bringing doom upon them. In truth, both were correct. The archaeologists had unearthed what should have remained buried. Daniel had triggered what should have remained sealed. Humanity had once again meddled with forces it could not control, and though a single sacrifice had bought them time, the cost had been immense. Weeks passed, but the memory did not fade. Governments sent investigators, scientists, even military forces to the site of the ruins. What they found was rubble, glowing faintly with residual energy that defied their instruments. The reports were classified, locked away under the highest levels of secrecy. Reyes was summoned again and again, questioned until his voice grew hoarse. He told the truth each time, though the officials dismissed his words as delirium. They wanted facts, not prophecy. The boy died of heat stroke, one report claimed. The strange lights were atmospheric anomalies, another insisted. But Reyes knew better. He carried Daniel's sacrifice like a stone in his chest, unbearable and immovable. And when he slept, he dreamed of the rift. Chains glowing faintly, shadows thrashing against them, and a whisper that always returned, when memory fades, so too will the chains. He woke each night drenched in sweat, certain that forgetting would be humanity's final mistake. Daniel's family received little more than a sealed coffin and a vague explanation of an accident during excavation. Reyes could not bring himself to tell them the truth. How could he? That their son had kissed a statue on a dare and doomed humanity, only to save it with his own life? They would never understand, never forgive. Yet he owed them something. One evening, when he could no longer bear the guilt, he wrote a letter. In it, he told the story as plainly as he could, omitting the horrors that would haunt them, but keeping the essence. Daniel had been brave, and he had saved the world. He left the letter at their doorstep and never returned. Some burdens were too heavy to share. Years slipped by, and the ruins became forbidden ground. Entire military divisions guarded the site, though most soldiers had no idea why. Reyes returned often, standing at the edge of the desert, staring at the place where it had all happened. The cracks in the sky had faded, but on some nights, when the air was still and the stars burned too brightly, he swore he could see faint lines etched across the heavens. He feared that those were not scars, but fractures waiting to reopen. And he knew the truth. The seal was not permanent. It never had been. Humanity lived on borrowed time, bought with the soul of a boy who had never intended to be a savior. Legends began to spread among locals once again, as they always had. They spoke of the guardian that had sacrificed itself, of the foolish boy who became chains of light. Some called him cursed, others called him chosen, but all agreed that his memory should not be forgotten. Reyes found small comfort in that. Each generation needed the story, no matter how distorted it became, for only through memory could the chains hold. But humanity's nature was to forget, to dismiss myths as fantasy and warnings as superstition. He feared that one day, the story would become nothing more than a joke again, just as it had been for Daniel. On the 50th anniversary of the event, Reyes, now an old man, returned to the desert one last time. His body was frail, his steps unsteady, but his mind burned with clarity. He stood before the ruins, now little more than sand and stone swallowed by time. The military had long abandoned the site, convinced that the danger had passed. Reyes knew better. He knelt, pressing his palm into the warm sand, and whispered, "We remember you, Daniel. We will not forget." The wind stirred, carrying a faint hum, almost like a voice acknowledging him. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to believe that Daniel still lingered. watching, holding the chains. For the first time in decades, he felt peace. But that night, as Reyes lay beneath the desert stars, the hum grew louder. The sky shimmered faintly, the scars glowing for the first time in years. He sat up, his heart pounding. The chains were weakening. He could feel it in his bones. Panic clawed at him, but then came a whisper, Daniel's voice, faint yet unmistakable. "It is not time yet. Rest." Tears streamed down Reyes's face as he realized Daniel was still fighting, even beyond death, his essence still burning against the tide. He collapsed back into the sand, his chest heavy but his spirit lighter. He would die knowing the boy still held the line. And so the desert remained quiet once more, its sands hiding the ruins, its winds carrying secrets older than civilization itself. The world moved on, ignorant of how close it had come to annihilation, blind to the cracks that still lingered in the fabric of the sky. But beneath that fragile peace, the truth endured. The cycle was not broken, only delayed. Somewhere beyond the veil, shadows still writhed, waiting, hungry. And when memory fades, when the name Daniel Kane becomes just another forgotten tale whispered by the wind, the chains will weaken, the gate will open again, and humanity will stand once more on the edge of extinction, unless another fool or another hero rises to take his place.